Hey everyone, tonight we're starting in a quiet mountain cabin, just as the sun melts behind the trees and the pine-scented breeze slips in through the screen door. You can almost hear the gentle click of toy cars on a wooden porch, until a voice cuts through the calm like a blade. You know she's not your real grandma, right? So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. Also, comment with your city and what time it is where you're watching. I love seeing how far my story reaches. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. We were one day into a family vacation in the Blue Ridge Mountains when Lila, my daughter-in-law, decided to let loose. She stood in the doorway of our rental cabin, wineglass in hand, staring out at my 8-year-old grandson, Miles, who was playing with his toy trucks by my feet. You know she's not your real grandma, right? The words floated out casually, like a joke. Or so she might have claimed. But I heard the jagged edge under them. Miles looked up, his forehead wrinkling in that puzzled way only kids can manage. "What do you mean, Mom?" Lila shrugged, her manicured fingers swirling her glass as if that made this less cruel. "I mean, she's just your dad's mom. Not really our family." She didn't know it, but in that moment, those 8 stupid words, she validated 3 long years of pretending. I'd spent them letting her treat me like charity, like background noise, like clutter on the family mantle. And now, I had my confirmation. I smiled. Not the smile I used to wear in PTA meetings or retirement potlucks. This one came from somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter. The kind of smile that lives beside a locked vault and a very well-paid attorney. Miles leaned into me, climbing into my lap like he'd done since he was a toddler. "You're my real grandma," he whispered in my ear. "I don't care what she says." God, I wanted to cry. But I didn't. I just kissed the top of his head and whispered, "I love you too, sugar." Then Kent, my son, appeared, already half annoyed. "Lila didn't mean it like that, Mom. She's just tired from the drive." Of course. Of course he'd defend her. Kent had become an echo of her tone over the years. When Lila made me sleep on the pull-out couch because the guest room was for real guests, he said nothing. When she served me dinner on paper plates while they ate off their wedding china, he looked the other way. When she subtly suggested that some people didn't know how to contribute to family gatherings, he just nodded. But now I had what I needed. I let Miles climb down and watched him pad inside. The sunset was burning a line across the mountain ridge, the sky glowing like it had secrets to spill. I listened as Lila's voice echoed through the paper-thin walls, complaining about cooking, about expectations, about elderly in-laws who didn't know how to be independent. What she didn't know, and what none of them knew, was that I'd orchestrated this entire vacation. The cabin? My idea. The payment? Quietly covered by me. But they thought Kent had footed the bill, just like they thought he'd been supporting me since my husband, Arthur, died 3 years ago. It was a delicious little lie, fed slowly and carefully. See, when Arthur passed, he left me more than grief. He left me a roadmap, one we'd built over 50 years of careful planning and whispered strategy. I let Kent and Lila believe I had nothing, just enough to scrape by. I played the part so well I almost started to believe it myself. But this trip was my last test, and Lila had just flunked it in record time. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Richard, my lawyer. "All set for tomorrow evening." "You sure?" I typed back, "Yes." Let it all begin at dinner. One more night. That's all I had to survive. Back inside, the spaghetti was ready. Lila slopped it onto plates like it offended her. Kent had a mountain of it. Miles got his favorite portion with cheese on top. Me? I got enough to be polite. "There's more if you want it," she said with a smile that could slice drywall. Miles chattered about cartoons. Lila complained about gas prices. Kent checked his email. And me? I savored every second of their ignorance. "Mom says we won't visit you as much anymore," Miles said suddenly, between bites. "Gas is expensive." The silence at the table was abrupt and sharp. "Well," I said, dabbing my mouth with a napkin, "sometimes people make decisions they think are best." What I didn't say was that this would be the last dinner where they got to make any decisions at all. Later that night, I sat back on the porch as thunder rumbled somewhere in the hills. A storm was coming, and not just in the sky. I thought about the $50 million tucked away in portfolios, property deeds, and trust funds. I thought about the 3 years of tests, of letting myself be humiliated, just to know what kind of people my son and his wife had become. I thought about Miles, sweet, curious, open-hearted Miles, and how much he deserved a grandmother who showed up. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending. And oh, how they were going to hate every second of it. I woke the next morning on that lumpy pull-out couch with my back stiff and crackling like old vinyl, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. The air in the cabin was cold, the kind that seeps into your joints and settles there, reminding you that you're no spring chicken. Still, I stretched, pulled the quilt around my shoulders, and listened to the sounds of the cabin waking up. Kent was in the kitchen, clattering around with the coffee maker like it was a foreign object. Lila's voice floated down the hall, already complaining about the sheets or the faucet pressure or maybe both. Miles was humming to himself in the bathroom, probably brushing his teeth with that messy toothpaste swish only kids his age could get away with. And me? I just sat still for a while, soaking it all in. See, 3 years ago when Arthur passed, I made a decision, one that still feels like a bit of a gamble. I didn't tell anyone just how much he'd left behind. We'd never been flashy. Arthur worked a modest job in industrial maintenance, and I'd run a home bookkeeping business for years, quiet, behind the scenes. But what no one knew was that I had a knack for numbers. More than that, I had a deep obsession with making our little grow into a lot. Real estate, mutual funds, old-school dividend stocks, even a stake in a now-booming local tech startup. It all started from a small inheritance I received from an aunt they never met. We lived simply, but by the time Arthur passed, our net worth was just north of $50 million. That's right, 50. And yet, I let everyone believe I had nothing. Kent and Lila were at my kitchen table not 2 weeks after the funeral. She had that sympathetic face she wore when she was delivering bad news like it was a gift-wrapped casserole. "Mom," Kent said, his voice hesitant, "we need to talk about your situation." "My situation," I echoed. "You can't afford the house anymore," Lila cut in. "We think it's time to sell. There's a lovely senior community not far from us, very affordable." There it was. The word. Affordable. Translation: just enough care to soothe their guilt, not enough to inconvenience their weekends. I let them push me out of my home. I let them help me find a cheap rental. They thought Kent was paying part of my bills. They never even asked to see a statement. All while I quietly bought the building that rental was in and started growing my investments again. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was Miles. Lila started with little things, scheduling family dinners when I couldn't make it, then acting surprised, excluding me from group photos, whispering not so softly that some people just didn't understand how to help raise children in modern times. I watched her distance miles from me, little by little. And Kent? He never stepped in. He played the same card Arthur used to when things got tense. Silent detachment. Now, here we were, in this cabin I'd paid for. During a vacation I'd proposed. After a dinner where I'd been fed like an afterthought, waiting for tonight's fireworks to begin. The coffee was finally brewing, and I shuffled into the kitchen to grab a mug. "Morning," Kent said, blinking at me like I'd surprised him. "Morning," I said, then smiled at Miles, who was munching on cereal. "Nana, guess what? I saw a bunny outside this morning. It was hopping real fast." "That's good luck," I said, sipping my coffee. "Bunnies always mean good luck." An old superstition, maybe, but I like to think there's wisdom tucked into strange places. Lila came in, dressed like she was headed to a resort brunch instead of a hike in the woods. "We still good for the trail this morning?" she asked. "Oh, absolutely," I said, cheerful. "I even packed a few snacks." She blinked. I could see her brain whirring, trying to reconcile the image of me, capable and organized, with the one she'd cultivated in her mind. A slow, forgetful old woman living paycheck to paycheck. We headed out just after 10, a short trail loop by the lake, no real elevation, but enough to make Lila regret her sandals. Kent carried a cooler with too many drinks. I just took a walking stick and a reusable bottle. Miles held my hand the entire way. "You're fast today, Nana," he said breathlessly. "I had my coffee," I winked, "and I've been walking a lot lately." Good for the heart. Honestly, I'd been working with a trainer twice a week for the last 2 years. You didn't think I'd pull off this scheme without staying fit enough to out-hike a 35-year-old, did you? When we reached the lake, Lila sank into a folding chair with a dramatic sigh. Kent set up a speaker and opened 2 hard seltzers. I took my place on a simple patch of grass, letting Miles show me his favorite rocks, twigs, and theories about how frogs think. And that's when the ache hit. Not physical, but emotional. This kid loved me. Really loved me. And for 3 years, I'd let someone dim that light just to see how far she'd go. He pulled a heart-shaped stone out of his pocket. "You can have this, Nana. It's a lucky one." I held it like a diamond. "It's perfect," I whispered. Kent wandered over and watched us for a minute. "You two really connect," he said. "We always have," I replied. "You know, I think Lila's been misunderstood sometimes. She's under a lot of stress." I just raised an eyebrow. "Stress doesn't excuse cruelty, Kent. You're too smart to confuse the two." He looked away. The wind picked up off the lake. It smelled like pine needles and coming rain. I watched Lila scroll through her phone, probably uploading photos that excluded me. For posterity. "You know," I said, mostly to myself, "people think power comes from money. But it doesn't. It comes from the ability to stay quiet until the right moment. That's when you're strongest." That afternoon, I suggested we have a big dinner that night. Home-cooked. Real food. My treat. "You don't have to do that," Mila said, clearly trying to discourage me. "But I want to," I said gently. "I think we all deserve something nice before we head home." Kent shrugged. "Sure, sounds good." Later, while they napped and Miles played with his trucks, I borrowed the car, drove down the mountain to a gourmet store in town, and picked up filet mignon, heirloom carrots, truffle butter, and a rich Cabernet that practically purred when I set it in the cart. That night would be a meal they'd never forget. And neither would I. Dinner prep started with music, low jazz humming through the tiny speaker I'd tucked into my tote bag. I chopped, seared, and seasoned with the ease of someone who's spent a lifetime pretending to be less capable than she is. The cabin's kitchen was small, but I moved through it like a dancer who knew every step. When Kent wandered in and caught a whiff of the butter hitting the hot pan, he stopped short. "Whoa, Are those steaks? Filet, I replied casually, turning one over with a satisfying sizzle. Figured we should eat something memorable. He blinked. Where'd you find those? I smiled. Gourmet shop down in town. They were on sale. They weren't, of course, but I'd learned long ago that people only question things when they felt insecure. Kent didn't feel insecure yet. Not enough to ask real questions. By the time Lila entered, the table was already set. I'd pulled out cloth napkins from my suitcase. Yes, I'd packed them, and placed a small votive candle in the center. The plates, though chipped, were clean. The wine glasses sparkled. "What's all this?" she asked, one perfectly sculpted brow arched like a movie villain. "A farewell dinner," I said sweetly. "Tomorrow we all go back to real life. I thought tonight we could pause and actually enjoy each other." "Right," she muttered, scanning the room like it offended her. Lila had no idea how to handle warmth when it wasn't hers to control. Miles scampered in, hair wild, cheeks flushed from playing. "It smells amazing, Nana!" I ruffled his hair. "I made your favorite, garlic mashed potatoes with extra butter." He beamed and took his seat, legs swinging under the table like a metronome. Dinner was quiet at first. Everyone was too distracted by the food to do much else. Kent made appreciative noises with each bite, and even Lila, who tried to act unimpressed, couldn't stop herself from going back for seconds. "This is excellent," Kent said, glancing at me over his wine. "Seriously, Mom. Why didn't you ever cook like this before?" I smiled as I took a sip of my own wine. "Who says I didn't?" He laughed, thinking I was joking. Lila didn't. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She was starting to feel it, that subtle shift in control. "You know," I began, wiping my mouth delicately, "we've spent a lot of time together this week. More than we have in a while." Kent nodded, still chewing. "It's been clarifying." Lila looked up. "Clarifying how?" I leaned back, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Then I placed my cloth napkin gently on the table and folded my hands. "I think it's time I told you something. Something I've kept to myself for the past 3 years." Kent's expression changed. Not panic, yet, but a kind of wary anticipation, like someone sensing the first vibration of an oncoming earthquake. Lila set down her fork. "You've both believed for quite some time that I've been struggling. Financially." Kent leaned in, brow furrowed. "Well, yeah. You said you couldn't afford the house, the rent, gas money, groceries." "Did I?" I asked, tilting my head. "Or did I simply not correct your assumptions?" No one moved. Even Miles paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "The truth is," I said slowly, "I've never needed a dime from either of you." I reached for my purse beside the chair, pulled out the tablet I'd tucked inside, and tapped the screen. A few swipes later, I turned it around and slid it across the table toward Kent. His eyes scanned the screen. Then they scanned it again. "I don't understand," he murmured. Lila snatched it from him, her eyes darting across the portfolio breakdown. Stocks, bonds, properties, trust funds. "That number," I said softly, "is the current balance across just 3 of my primary investment accounts. I didn't include the real estate assets or the offshore holdings. Too many zeros would have distracted from the message." Lila's hands trembled. "This can't be real," she whispered. "But it is," I replied. "It always has been." Kent looked up at me, his face pale. "Why didn't you tell us?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Because I needed to know who you really were when you thought I had nothing." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut steak. "I watched you, Kent," I said gently. "I watched how quickly you transitioned from concerned son to distant caretaker. I saw how easily you let Lila chip away at my relationship with Miles. I heard every dismissive remark about my situation. And I let it all happen, because I needed the truth more than I needed your approval." Miles looked confused. "What's going on?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Nana just had some things she needed to say." Lila found her voice, though it was shaky. "So what now? You tricked us for 3 years, and now what? Are we just supposed to clap and say, 'well done'?" I shrugged. "You don't have to say anything, but you will listen." Kent buried his face in his hands. "You thought I was poor. You thought I was dependent, and you treated me accordingly. You made me sleep on couches, eat alone, miss holidays, and you taught my grandson that I was less, that I wasn't family. But I am family, and I always will be." Lila stood abruptly. "You're being dramatic. You think just because you have some money." $52 million, I interrupted, "as of this morning." She stumbled back like I'd struck her. "You don't get to question my methods, Lila," I added, still calm. "You don't get to pretend you were kind when I've got 3 years of evidence that proves otherwise." Kent finally looked up. "Mom, what happens now?" I considered his question. "I'm changing my will," I said flatly. "Miles will inherit everything when he turns 25. A trust is being set up, with lawyers managing it, not you two." Lila gasped. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," I said, "is how easily you tried to erase me. So now I'm ensuring that even if you keep trying, my presence will outlast all of us." Kent looked stunned. "And there's a condition," I added. "If I find out either of you interferes with my relationship with Miles, the money goes to charity." You could hear the air leave the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Eventually, I stood. "Cleanup's on me tonight. Least I can do, right?" As I cleared the plates, Lila sat frozen. Kent stared at nothing. Miles picked up his fork again and whispered, "That was the best dinner ever, Nana." I smiled. "Just wait till dessert." I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, but because the silence after a storm can be strangely invigorating. The cabin was quiet, but not peacefully so. It was the kind of hush that comes when people are lying awake in the dark, staring at ceilings, stewing in the shock of truths they never imagined facing. At around 2 a.m., I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and stepped out onto the porch. The mountain air was brisk and clean, carrying the scent of pine needles and rain-soaked earth. I sat in the creaky wooden chair I'd claimed on the first night and looked up at the stars. They were blindingly clear, like someone had polished the sky just for me. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt weightless. 3 years of playing poor. 3 years of forgotten birthday invitations and cold shoulders at Christmas. 3 years of whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. I had cataloged every one like I was building a case, which, in a way, I was. I heard the door creak behind me. "Can't sleep either." Kent's voice was soft, wary. I didn't look at him. Too much to digest, I guess. He sat on the step beside me, pulling a hoodie tight around himself. I still can't believe it. I tilted my head, pretending to study the stars. "Which part? The money, or the fact that I never trusted you enough to tell you about it?" He flinched. "I guess both." The truth was, I'd once planned to hand Kent everything. Back before Lila. back when he still called me twice a week just to check in. But life had a way of reshuffling the deck. People show their hands when they think there's nothing to win.
I don't want to be that person, he said quietly.
Which one? I asked. The son who married someone who treats people like dirt? Or the one who let her do it without saying a word? His silence answered for him.
I should have spoken up, he whispered.
Yes, I said. You should have. He looked down at his hands, thumb rubbing the edge of his wedding ring. I thought I was keeping the peace. That if I didn't rock the boat, everyone would be happy. Old wisdom says, when you stand in the middle of the road too long, you get hit from both sides. He gave a hollow laugh. Yeah, well, I definitely got hit. I turned to face him then. Really looked at him. He looked older, tired in a way that couldn't be blamed on sleepless nights. Maybe, just maybe, the weight of his choices was finally sinking in. I want to fix things, Mom. That's not something you get to declare, I replied softly. It's something you prove. We sat in silence, both of us watching our breath curl into the night like ghosts. After a few minutes, Kent said, Lila thinks you're punishing us. I'm not punishing, I said. I'm protecting. There's a difference. She doesn't see it that way. She doesn't see a lot of things. I stood, brushing pine needles from my lap. Go back inside, Kent. Try to sleep. Tomorrow morning, we leave this cabin, and everything changes. Back in the cabin, I checked on Miles. He was fast asleep, his little mouth open, one arm hanging off the bed like he'd tried to hug the whole world and missed. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. You, my boy, are why I did this. The next morning was weird. Not tense, exactly, just strange, in the way that people who've seen each other naked emotionally act like nothing happened the next day. Lila avoided eye contact, moving through breakfast prep like a robot. Kent kept trying to offer help, overly polite, like that would erase everything. Miles, however, was completely unaffected. Nana, can I ride in your car today? I grinned. Absolutely. Lila opened her mouth like she might object, but one glance from Kent and she clamped it shut. Progress. As we packed up, I made a point of folding my things neatly, repacking the dish towels and cloth napkins I'd brought like relics. Lila watched me from the corner of her eye, perhaps realizing, for the first time, that I'd never really belonged in their little family unit the way she'd pretended I did. As they loaded into their SUV, Miles ran back to me. You forgot your plant, Nana! He held up the little pot of lavender I'd placed on the porch rail. I knelt down and took it from him. Thank you, sweetheart. That's exactly why I need you. You see the little things. He beamed. I'll see you soon, right? He asked. I nodded. Sooner than you think. That afternoon, I arrived back at my apartment, which, as I reminded myself, I actually owned. The neighborhood was modest, the kind of place where people knew each other just enough to wave from the porch, but not enough to pry. It had been the perfect cover. But now, it was time for something new. Within 2 weeks, I'd moved into a house 2 hours away, in a leafy town with good schools and an organic co-op. Quiet, yes, but not isolated. The kind of place where I could host Sunday dinners and Miles could spend summers without feeling like he was being exiled. When I gave Kent the address, I included a small note. Visits are always welcome. Just don't show up empty-handed or empty-hearted. 3 days later, he and Miles came bearing tulips and a homemade lemon loaf. Lila didn't come. That was fine. I wasn't ready either. Number. That Sunday, as Miles helped me plant tomatoes in the backyard, he asked, Nana, what's a trust? I paused. Where'd you hear that? Daddy said you set one up for me. Is that like a bank? Sort of, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. It's a way of making sure the people I love are taken care of, even if I'm not around. He frowned. But you're always going to be around, right? I bent down, looked him in the eye. As long as I can be. And even after the things I've set up, they'll make sure you always have what you need. He nodded solemnly. Even if Mom gets mad again? I smiled gently. Especially then. We kept digging. Later, we made pancakes from scratch, real ones with buttermilk and blueberries. As we sat at my new kitchen table, he asked if he could bring his favorite rock from the vacation to school for show and tell. Of course, I said. Tell them your grandmother helped you find it. He grinned, the rich one. I nearly choked on my coffee. You little rascal. I like being your favorite, he added matter-of-factly. You always were, I whispered. And finally, for the first time in years, I believed it wouldn't be taken away again. By the end of that week, I had officially unpacked every box in my new home, something I hadn't done in over 3 years. It felt ceremonial, like shedding an old skin. I lit a lavender candle in each room and played Miles Davis through the built-in speakers the realtor didn't think I'd care about. Truth is, I cared about all of it now. Every corner, every cabinet, every little luxury I had once pretended not to need. I claimed it fully. I didn't hear from Lila for nearly a month. Kent called regularly. Short, careful check-ins at first, then longer chats with Miles about his rock collection, a new bike, or a mystery he was writing for school. But Lila? Silent. Until one Thursday morning, when her name popped up on my phone while I was pruning the basil. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds before answering. Hello? Hi, Mrs. Chambers, she said. Not Mom. Not even Lila. Just Mrs. Chambers. Well, that's formal, I said, brushing a leaf from my sleeve. A pause. I didn't know how else to start. Try with the truth, I replied calmly. Always a safe bet. She exhaled, shaky and uneven. I was wrong. About everything. I waited. I was selfish and cruel and entitled, she continued. And if I'm being honest, I didn't think you mattered. I thought, once Henry was gone, there wasn't a place for you anymore. Oof, not exactly what one wants to hear over the basil, but at least she wasn't sugarcoating it. And now? I asked. And now, I realize how much I underestimated you. Not just the money. You, the person, the grandmother. The woman who raised the man I married. I've been trying to figure out how to make it right. That's going to take time, I said, and consistency. I know. A long pause. I was wondering, she ventured, if I could bring Miles up next weekend. Just the two of us. I'll admit, that one threw me. You want to visit with Miles? I repeated slowly. Yes, she said, then quickly added, I mean, only if you're okay with it. No pressure. I want to try. I stared out over the garden. The roses were finally blooming. All right, I said. Next Saturday, noon. And tell him to bring that rock collection. Thank you, she said softly. Really. I didn't say you're welcome. Not yet. She arrived on time, which shocked me more than the phone call. Hair pulled back, no makeup, a simple cotton dress, no diamond studs, no curated Instagram look. just Lila, stripped down and clearly nervous. Miles burst out of the car like he was spring-loaded, hugging me before I could say a word. "I brought all my rocks, Nana. Even the weird one that might be a fossil." I smiled. "That one's my favorite." Lila lingered on the porch while Miles raced inside. She held a covered dish awkwardly in her hands. "Lasagna," she offered. "From scratch. Your recipe." "Impressive," I said, stepping aside so she could enter. "Hope you didn't cut corners." "I didn't," she said. "Even made the sauce myself." In the kitchen, she placed the dish on the counter like it was a peace offering, which, in a way, it was. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said suddenly, her back to me. "Oh. Yeah. Turns out I've got some unresolved family stuff. Jealousy. Control issues. I was trying to be the queen of a family I barely understood." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway. "And Miles?" She turned. "He loves you." He never stopped. I saw that on the trip, and I hated how natural it was, how easily he gravitated to you. But now I see, it's because you made room for him. You saw him. I was just trying to keep the picture perfect. "Perfect's overrated," I said. "Tell me about it." The lasagna, surprisingly, was decent. Not seasoned like mine, but hearty and honest, like the version of herself she was trying to be. After lunch, she cleaned the dishes without being asked, then joined Miles and me in the garden. She helped plant a new row of marigolds, got her hands dirty, listened when I explained why marigolds protect tomatoes from pests. "Really?" she said, raising a brow. "I always thought that was a myth." "Scientifically debated," I admitted. "But they make things prettier either way." She looked at me then. Really looked. "I'd like to come again. If that's okay." "We'll see," I said. That night, as I stood on the porch with a cup of mint tea, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not the passive kind, the sort that's earned. Forgiveness doesn't arrive all at once. It's a seed. You plant it, water it, and pray the roots hold. I was willing to try. The next morning, I got a letter from my lawyer. The trust had officially been transferred into a specialized education and wellness account for Miles. The assets were growing steadily, safely, securely, independently. Just like me. I called Kent to let him know. "We're going to try family therapy," he said. "Lila actually suggested it." "Well, well," I teased. "Miracles do happen." We laughed, lightly. For once, the kind of laugh that didn't carry weight. Weeks turned into months. Lila came often, sometimes with Miles, sometimes alone. She was never quite comfortable, but she was trying. She asked questions, took notes on my recipes, listened more than she talked. We were, slowly, becoming something that resembled family. Not perfect, but intentional. And Miles, he flourished, grades up, confidence up. He even wrote a school essay titled, "The Woman Who Made Me Believe in Magic." It was about me. I cried when Kent sent a copy. The kind of tears that come from being seen, finally, fully, for who you truly are. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I was in the middle of prepping my cranberry orange compote when my phone buzzed with a text from Kent. "Any chance you could host this year? We'd really love to be at your place." I stared at the message for a solid minute, stirring the bubbling cranberries with one hand and feeling my heartbeat sink to the slow, syrupy pops of fruit breaking down in the pot. It was the first time Kent had ever asked to celebrate a holiday at my home. For 3 years, they'd either made excuses, planned trips out of town, or invited me as an afterthought, usually with the suggestion that I bring something simple like bread rolls. But this was different. I typed back, "Of course, I'll cook. You bring the appetite." Then, just because I'm still me, I added, "And real plates, no paper this time." He replied with a laughing emoji and a "got it." Thanksgiving morning arrived like a gentle exhale. The air outside was crisp but forgiving, the sun warm enough to light up the last of the maple leaves still clinging to the trees. I put on my favorite playlist, jazz and some slow acoustic folk, and set about the kitchen like I was painting a masterpiece. The turkey had been brined overnight in rosemary, sage, orange peel, and a little bourbon. The stuffing was sourdough and wild mushroom. My pecan pie was already cooling by the window, and the mashed potatoes were whipped with roasted garlic and heavy cream, none of that watery business people pass off as tradition. I set the table with actual china this year, the kind Henry and I had picked out decades ago but rarely used. I even pulled out the cloth napkins, folding them with a little twist in the center like I'd seen in a hotel once. The final touch was placing a small glass bowl in front of each plate, each one holding a single, handwritten note. On every card, I'd written a short, heartfelt gratitude to each person attending. Lila's note read, "Thank you for trying. I see it." They arrived just after 1. Miles burst through the door first, cheeks red from the cold and carrying a pie box like it was gold. "Nana, Mom made pumpkin cheesecake." "Cheesecake?" I raised a brow as Lila followed him in, cheeks pink, not from cold but effort. Risky move. She laughed, clearly nervous. "I thought I'd branch out. You know, expand the pie empire." Kent came in next with a bottle of wine. "We brought the good stuff," he said, "and real plates just in case." "Color me impressed," I said, ushering them into the living room where the fireplace was already going. "Let's eat before I pass out from the smell." We sat, we served, and something strange happened. We talked. Like humans. Like a family. Lila complimented the turkey, twice without sounding fake. Kent asked questions about the herbs I'd grown out back. Miles regaled us with stories of his science project, a baking soda volcano that exploded a little too well, and I found myself belly laughing in a way I hadn't since Henry's last Thanksgiving. "You okay?" Kent asked at one point, during the lull between main course and dessert. "More than okay," I said, watching Miles nibble at his third dinner roll. "I'm present." Lila cleared her throat. We've been talking about how we want the holidays to look from now on. And we were hoping maybe this could become tradition? Thanksgiving at your place? I looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her. She was trying. I could see it in the way she waited for my response instead of pushing the idea like she used to. "I think that could work," I said. She smiled, small, uncertain, but real. Later that evening, after the dishes were done and Miles had dozed off under a blanket on the couch, Kent handed me a letter. "From me," he said. I didn't know how to say all this in person. I waited until they'd left before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery, with Kent's familiar print. "Mom, I don't know what I expected when Dad died, but I handled it all wrong. I let my grief turn into avoidance, and I let Lila's insecurity drive how we treated you. I regret that every day. But what I'm most sorry for is letting Miles grow up without fully knowing you. That's changed now, and I hope it never changes back. Thank you for the second chance. Love, Kent." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer next to my tea bags and peppermints. The sacred drawer, I called it, where I kept photos and notes that reminded me of who I was, especially when other people tried to make me feel small. That letter had just become part of my emotional emergency kit. The next morning, I called Richard Morrison, my attorney, and asked him to prepare an addendum to the trust.
Nothing major.
Just a note clarifying that if Kent and Lila continued maintaining a healthy relationship with me for 5 consecutive years, measured by consistent contact, shared holidays, and no further pull-out couch infractions, then a portion of the assets would be released to them early.
It wasn't forgiveness. It was trust with training wheels. Because even wisdom needs a backup plan. By the first snowfall, Miles and I were planning our spring garden. He wanted to plant watermelon. I explained how Vermont winters weren't exactly watermelon-friendly, but I admired his ambition. "You've got vision, kid," I said. "You'll go far." He grinned. "Like to college?" "Yes, like college," I smiled. "And beyond." Later, as I sat by the fire sipping my mint tea, I thought about how strange life is. How the same people who once made you feel invisible can, if they choose, learn to see you again. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the harm. It's about giving yourself the freedom to stop carrying it. And finally, I was free. The new year rolled in quietly, just the way I liked it. No fireworks, no loud countdowns, just the hush of snow falling outside and the soft tick of my mantel clock. I stayed in, wrapped in my thickest robe, sipping hot cocoa with too many marshmallows and watching the fire dance like it had secrets. It felt like a soft reset, the kind of silence that gives you space to breathe again. Kent called me the next morning. We made waffles. Well, Lila made waffles. Miles mostly got powdered sugar everywhere. "That's what powdered sugar's for," I said. He paused. "We wanted to invite you over today. Just to hang out, no agenda." I blinked. The last time I'd been invited to their house without a calendar reminder and guilt-tinged logistics was never. "I'd love to," I said, surprising even myself with how easily it came out. They greeted me at the door like they'd been waiting years to do it right. Lila had on a chunky knit sweater and zero makeup, which told me she wasn't performing. The house smelled like cinnamon and orange peel, a candle I'd once given her that she'd never opened. Until now. Miles pulled me toward the dining table, where he'd laid out a board game with all the strategy of a seasoned diplomat. "Nana, you're on my team. Mom's a sore loser." "I heard that," Lila called from the kitchen, laughing. I settled in with my hot tea, and for the next 2 hours, I let myself enjoy it. No second guessing, no suspicion, just being there. Being part of the noise, the banter, the small moments that make a family feel like home. Even the dog, yes, they'd finally caved and gotten Miles a rescued dog, curled up at my feet like it had known me all along. After lunch, Lila and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, elbows deep in sudsy water. It was the first time in months we'd been unsupervised without Kent playing referee. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, not meeting my eyes. I waited, drying a plate with slow, deliberate motions. "I signed up for a caregiving support group," she said finally. "Online, just once a week." "Oh?" "Yeah. I realized I'd built up this image in my head that taking care of anyone older automatically meant giving something up, like freedom or independence. But it's not that. It's just adjustment." "Adjustment," I repeated, handing her a rinsed casserole dish. "That's a kind word for what this has been." She flinched slightly but nodded. I deserved that. We worked in silence for a bit, but it wasn't the brittle silence we'd shared before. It was contemplative. "I've never had a real relationship with any of my grandparents," she said after a while. "They either passed before I was old enough or just weren't involved. So I didn't know what to model. I didn't know how to fit you into our life." "I don't need to be a model," I said gently. "I just need a seat at the table. And not the folding one." She laughed, a little choked. "Noted."
Later that night, back at my house, I opened my journal and wrote something I hadn't dared to before. January 1st. Lila is learning. I'm letting her. It was simple, but after 3 years of deep suspicion and deeper hurt, that sentence was monumental. I curled up in bed and let the quiet wrap around me like a weighted blanket. Weeks passed, each one more ordinary than the last, and that was a gift. I started teaching Miles to knit. He was a natural. Said it felt like video games for your fingers. We made a hat, 2 lopsided pot holders, and started a scarf he planned to give to Lila for Mother's Day. Kent sent pictures of Miles wearing his creations like high fashion, proudly captioned, "Nana's Knitwear Collection." Even Lila started sending the occasional text. "Do you have that lemon chicken recipe, the one Miles liked? I burned the pot roast again. Please help. What brand of tea do you buy? Your house always smells calming." I responded every time, sometimes with actual advice, sometimes with just a "good luck, chef" and a thumbs up emoji. I didn't push. I didn't expect. I just let her reach out at her own pace. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it's just the quiet replacement of resentment with curiosity, distance with effort. One Saturday morning, I was sitting on my porch with my second cup of coffee when a delivery van pulled up. Out came a man in a beanie and steel-toe boots, carrying a tall wooden planter box and 2 big bags of soil. "Delivery for Miss Bennett," he said, squinting at his clipboard. "I didn't order anything," I said. He just grinned and nodded toward the card taped to the planter. "Happy spring, Nana. Let's grow something new. Miles. And Mom and Dad too, I guess." My throat caught. I ran my fingers over the cedar wood and thought about all the things we'd already started growing. Relationships, respect, memory. Lila didn't have to send this. She didn't have to include herself and Kent on the card either. But she had. Effort. That's all I'd ever really wanted. That evening, as I tucked a few basil seedlings into the fresh soil, I thought about something Henry used to say. People aren't made of stone, Lorna. They're made of clay. Give them water, light, and a second chance, and sometimes they surprise you. I used to think that line was wishful thinking. Now, I wasn't so sure. Because here I was, planting new life in the backyard of a home that had once been my sanctuary and my hiding place. And for the first time in years, I wasn't planting it alone. Spring bloomed like an old friend coming back from a long journey. Slowly, then all at once. The garden Miles had helped plant came alive in colors that felt louder than sound. Yellow tulips pushing through soil like tiny warriors. Basil leaves stretching like they knew they had purpose. And tomatoes that had no business growing that fast. And somehow, just like the garden, my life started to feel less dormant. One warm Sunday afternoon, I got a knock at the door. Unexpected, but familiar. When I opened it, Lila stood there, alone, holding a bottle of sparkling apple cider and a box of lemon bars. "I come in peace," she said, lifting both like a peace offering. I laughed, stepped aside, and waved her in. No makeup, again. No designer purse. Just Lila, nervous, but trying. We sat on the porch with our feet up and plates balanced on our laps. "I talked to my mother," she said eventually. That sentence landed with a surprising weight. "I didn't even know you were speaking." "We weren't," she said. "But I figured if I wanted to be a better daughter-in-law, maybe I should start with trying to be a better daughter." I let that settle between us. "It didn't go well," she added with a wry smile. "But I'm not expecting miracles. I just wanted to try." I nodded. Trying counts more than most people admit. She looked relieved, like I'd given her permission to fail as long as she was still showing up. By the way, she added, Miles wants to come here for the whole week this summer, not just weekends.
Oh?
He says it's Nana Camp. I chuckled. We'll need matching shirts. She laughed. He's already designing them with glitter glue. That night, as I cleaned up our dishes and folded the blanket we'd shared on the porch, I felt something unfamiliar. Calm acceptance. There'd been so many years of resentment, tension, and quiet fury. But now, it felt like the roots of something new were taking hold. Nothing dramatic, just honest growth. The kind that lasts. June arrived with fanfare. Not the explosive kind, but the kind made of fireflies, watermelon juice, and Miles showing up with a rolling suitcase twice his size. He didn't knock, he just barged in like it was his second home. "Where's my room?" he asked, arms wide. I'd prepared the guest room with new sheets, a nightlight, and a little basket of books, but instead of guiding him there, I pointed toward the sunroom. "You get the sunroom. It's got better light for your sketches." His eyes lit up like Christmas. The week flew by. We built birdhouses, baked peach cobbler, and watched old cartoons with commentary like we were critics on assignment. "Nana, why did everyone in the 80s have big hair?" Because gravity took a vacation. One night we camped out on the screened-in porch with sleeping bags, flashlights, and snacks we weren't supposed to eat that late. He told me secrets. About the girl he liked at school who always beat him at Foursquare, about how he sometimes felt like his mom was watching him a little too closely, about how Dad got quieter when work was stressful. I listened, didn't offer advice unless he asked. Just listened. Because that's what I'd always wanted someone to do for me. Midweek, Kent stopped by. He brought Miles's allergy meds, but mostly I think he came to see if I was okay handling it all. When he stepped into the kitchen and saw Miles helping me prep dinner, wearing an apron, hair sticking up like he'd been wrestling raccoons, he smiled so wide it softened his entire face. "Smells amazing in here," he said. "Tell your wife it's the same lemon chicken she texted me about last month." He chuckled. She still hasn't gotten it right. "You mean she still hasn't followed the instructions?" He laughed, more freely now. Then, more quietly, he said, "I like who we are right now." I turned and looked at him, really looked at him. "I do too." Before he left, he hugged me, a real hug, the kind where your chest touches, not the awkward pat-pat kind. "I love you, Mom," he said as he stepped out the door. And I believed him. One evening, after Miles was asleep, I sat in the garden with a glass of peach tea and my thoughts. I remembered something I'd read years ago that stuck with me. The most dangerous assumptions are the ones you don't realize you're making. And wasn't that the truth? I'd assumed Kent would always see me as an obligation. He'd assumed I needed managing. Lila had assumed I was powerless. And I'd assumed I was too old for things to change. But here we were, surprising each other in the quietest, kindest ways. And maybe that was the most hopeful thing of all. A few nights later, Lila came to pick up Miles. It was late, and he'd fallen asleep mid-puzzle on the couch, drooling onto his own arm. She knelt beside him, brushing his curls from his forehead. "He's happier here than I've seen him in weeks," she said softly. "Let him stay another day," I offered. "We're building a bird bath tomorrow." She smiled. "You're spoiling him." "I know. It's my job." She looked at me for a long time, then said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And for the first time, I saw something raw and real in her eyes. "I didn't give up," I said, "but I did let go."
What's the difference?
Giving up means you stop caring. Letting go means you stop controlling. One breaks things, the other gives them room to heal. She nodded, eyes glistening. I'm trying. I really am.
I see that.
That night, I stood at the window, watching her taillights fade into the dusk, and I felt a deep, quiet peace I hadn't felt since before Henry died. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't justice. This was restoration. Slow, imperfect, but real. And maybe that's all we ever need. The house felt too quiet after Miles left. No tiny footsteps pattering across the hardwood floors. No random questions about bugs or the universe or which Ninja Turtle was the most tax smart. For the record, I said Donatello. He's clearly got a Roth IRA. I wandered from room to room the next morning. Not aimlessly, just slowly. Letting silence settle where laughter had echoed. That's the strange thing about love. It expands a space when it's present and makes it feel hollow when it's gone. By noon, I was pulling weeds in the garden like they'd offended me personally. It had only been a week since I'd last done it, but they'd grown back, bold and defiant. Resilient little things. I respected them for it. Just as I was tossing a handful into the compost, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go, but something in me, a twitch of curiosity or maybe an echo of instinct, made me answer. Hello? Mrs. Merrick? The voice was smooth, practiced, too calm. Yes? This is Oliver Blaine. I'm an attorney representing the Whitman family estate. I froze. The trowel slipped from my hand, landing in the soft dirt with a muted thud. The Whitmans. That name hadn't passed my ears in nearly 40 years. I believe you were listed as a secondary beneficiary in a trust created by Eleanor Whitman, your late cousin? Ah. Eleanor. Sharp as a knife, glamorous as a Parisian mirror, and completely uninterested in anything she couldn't control. We hadn't spoken since the Reagan administration. She passed? I asked, quieter now. Last month. Complications from pneumonia. She'd updated her estate last year and included a bequest in your name. We'd like to schedule a meeting. I blinked, stunned into stillness. Of course, I said. Please send me the details. We hung up. I sat there, in the dirt, surrounded by stubborn weeds and blooming daisies, and just stared. 2 days later, I was in a law office downtown that smelled like polished wood and forgotten promises. A young assistant brought me tea in a dainty porcelain cup. I appreciated the detail. It matched my grandmother's old set. Then, Mr. Blaine entered. Young, sharp suit, polished shoes. Polite in a way that felt rehearsed. I won't take much of your time, he said, laying a document in front of me. Miss, Whitman left you her coastal property in Kennebunkport and a liquid asset sum of $3.2 million. You'll find all the details outlined here. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? She mentioned you'd understand once you read the letter. He handed me a small envelope sealed with crimson wax. Fancy. I opened it with shaking hands. Lorna, if you're reading this, I've gone where even my good manners can't reach. We were never close. My fault, mostly. But I admired you. You built a life with less flash but more substance than I ever managed. I was lonely in the end. Too proud to say it out loud. This house should have been filled with laughter and pie and grandkids with messy hands. Instead, it echoed. Maybe you'll do something better with it. Don't waste it on spite. That would be so me. Love, Eleanor. I read it twice. Then laughed. Out loud,
alone. Because of course Eleanor would leave behind millions, a beach house, and a final jab about bitterness. But she also left me something else, a challenge. Don't waste it on spite. When I told Kent and Lila, their reactions were exactly what you'd expect, but dialed down. Kent blinked rapidly like a man solving a math problem with too many decimals. Lila pursed her lips so tight I thought they might disappear entirely. "So, you're richer now?" Kent asked carefully. "Technically, yes," I said. "But I'm also still just me. Same basil plants, same rocking chair, same favorite brand of peanut butter." Lila stared out the window. "And the beach house?" "Unfurnished. Needs work. Might become a retreat for foster kids. Or maybe single moms who need a break. Haven't decided yet." Her face shifted, barely. "You're giving it away?" "I'm deciding," I corrected. "Giving it meaning is not the same as giving it away." Silence settled like a fog. Until Miles, bless him, came barreling in with a stick insect on his hand, yelling, "Nana, look!" He's waving. And just like that, the tension broke. That night, as I sat journaling on the porch, I reflected on Eleanor's gift. Not the money. That was nice, sure, but fleeting. It was the gesture, the reminder that even fractured family ties can hold flickers of grace. Even if it comes too late for reconciliation, it's not too late for purpose. Old age insight of the night. Forgiveness is less about forgetting and more about refusing to carry what isn't yours. Quirky fact of the day. Stick insects can survive without a head for several days. Just like some family arguments, apparently. Over the next few weeks, I found myself more energized. Not just because of the inheritance, but because something inside had softened. I started baking again. Real baking. The kind that fogs the windows and fills the house with cinnamon and purpose. Neighbors stopped by. Word had spread about my story. Well, parts of it. I became the quiet woman with the porch swing and secrets. I didn't mind the mystery. Mystery gives people permission to imagine better endings. Kent helped install a new irrigation system in the garden. Lila brought over heirloom seeds. Small gestures, not grand, but enough. Miles helped me build a welcome sign for the gate out front. It simply said, "This house grows second chances." Because it did. And so did I. The sign Miles and I made, "This house grows second chances," became more than decoration. It became a kind of quiet mission statement. It was funny how things changed once the performance was over. Once the masks were off, people started showing up differently. Or maybe I was the one who changed, and they just adjusted to match. Take Lila, for instance. She didn't suddenly transform into someone warm and fuzzy, baking banana bread and offering foot rubs. Number. But she did start showing up early to pick up Miles. She'd linger longer on the porch. Less scowl, more squinting into the afternoon light, like she was searching for something she wasn't sure how to ask for. The first time she came alone, I admit, I braced myself. But all she did was bring over a cutting from her grandmother's peony bush. "I thought it might do better here," she said, avoiding eye contact. I took it carefully. "It will. Thank you." No fanfare, no dramatic apology, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start is the bravest part. Around that same time, I got a letter in the mail. Real paper, real pen. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was from Iris, my sister. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. "Lorna..." I watched the video, the one that went viral. I know you didn't post it. It had that tone only a nosy neighbor could capture. But you looked strong. So strong, I cried.
I've been angry for so long I forgot what it felt like not to be. But seeing you, it made me remember Mom's hands. The way she used to knead bread like it owed her money. And you laughing at her apron covered in flour. I miss you. I'm in Portland now, teaching ceramics to kids with too much energy and not enough confidence. If you're willing, maybe we could meet. Start small. Maybe start over. Iris. I read it 3 times before I let myself breathe. I hadn't even known someone filmed the dinner reveal. Probably the neighbor's daughter, the one always vlogging from her hammock. Apparently, it had gone semi-viral under the caption, "Grandma flips the script. Watch this table turn." I wasn't thrilled about being internet famous. But if it brought Iris back, maybe the universe knew what it was doing. I called her the next day. Her voice on the other end was older, raspier, but still had that same lilt when she laughed. "I thought you'd call me out for my ugly handwriting," she said. "I thought about it," I teased, "but I'm trying to grow." We agreed to meet halfway between our towns. Small antique cafe, red checkered tablecloths, and enough lemon pie to grease the wheels of forgiveness. She brought a ceramic pot shaped like a sleeping cat. "I made this while thinking of you," she said. I burst out laughing. "Because I nap in the sun, or because I hiss at people I don't like?" "Both," she said with a grin. It was healing. Not perfect, but real. Old age insight of the day. Not every broken thing needs fixing. Some just need replanting in better soil. Speaking of soil, the peony cutting from Lila took root beautifully, and she noticed. She came over the next week with tea. Not store-bought, not in a bottle. Homemade iced tea, with mint. "This used to be my mom's recipe," she said. "I remember," I replied. "She made it the summer Miles was born." Lila blinked. "I forgot you were there." I didn't say anything, just sipped. Let her sit in that memory for a while. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "I was jealous, you know." Of how much Miles loved you. It caught me off guard. "Why?" I asked. "Because it was so easy for him to love you. And I was working so hard, trying to be enough." I set my glass down gently. "Lila, loving someone doesn't subtract from loving others. Love isn't a pie." She let out a short, dry laugh. I was never good at math. "I noticed," I teased, and she rolled her eyes, but smiled. A small smile. A human one. That night, I updated my journal. June 14th. Lila admitted something true. I didn't flinch. Quirky fact of the day. Peonies can live for over 100 years. Some gardens still bloom with the same rootstock planted by someone's great-great-grandmother. Love's like that, too. Hardy, quiet, stubbornly beautiful. Later that week, Kent and I started a new tradition, Sunday evening walks. We didn't talk about the past. Not much. Instead, we talked about projects, recipes, and that time he crashed his bike into a mailbox at 12 and tried to blame a squirrel. "I think I lost my way for a while," he admitted one evening as we passed a field of fireflies blinking like lazy Morse code. "I know," I said. "But I'm trying now." I nodded. Trying is everything. We stood still for a moment, watching the bugs light up around us. "Mom?" Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me?" I think I already have. But I also think forgiveness is like walking. You don't do it once. You just keep stepping forward. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he quietly reached for my hand. We walked on. When I was younger, I thought closure came in one big, loud moment. Something cinematic, maybe tearful, definitely dramatic. But as it turns out, closure's quieter than that. It arrives like the smell of coffee at dawn. Warm, familiar, and unnoticed if you're not paying attention. That's how I felt the morning I found Miles sitting on the porch swing, scribbling in a little notebook I hadn't seen before. "What's that, sweetheart?" I asked, stepping out with my tea. He held it up. "My truth journal." I blinked. "Your what now?" "Miss Adriana at school said if something feels confusing or big, we can write it down and talk to a grown-up later." He shrugged. "So I've been writing stuff about, family." I sat beside him slowly, heart thumping just a little harder than usual. "Would you like to share one?" He hesitated, then opened the book and read aloud. "I don't like it when Mom says Nana is just Dad's mom, because that makes it sound like she's not mine, too." I didn't say anything right away, just stared at his soft little hands gripping the page. Then I exhaled. "You're right. That would hurt to hear." "I love Mom," he said quickly, as if defending. I leaned in. "There aren't supposed to be rules about love. Real love doesn't come with fine print." He smiled. "That's what I thought." Old age insight of the day. Kids don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to be consistent and kind when it counts. That evening, as the sky melted into pink and tangerine, I got a knock on my door. Not the usual family kind. This one was dressed in a thrifted denim jacket, heavy boots, and held a guitar case like it was carrying state secrets. I knew instantly. "Jamie McCrae," I said with a laugh. "You haven't changed a bit." "Well, I've added some gray," he said, grinning. "But I'd argue I wear it better than my 20s. Jamie had been Henry's best friend and my college almost boyfriend. After Henry proposed, Jamie drifted into another city, another life. But we stayed Christmas card close. Turns out he was passing through, playing at a folk venue just outside town. "I saw your story online," he said, once we'd settled onto the porch with warm cider. "The video." I groaned. "Please don't tell me you read the comments." He laughed. "Nah, but one of them said, 'This is what real generational wealth looks like. Not money, but dignity.'" That one stayed with me. We didn't talk about old regrets or unspoken what-ifs. We talked about music, the absurdity of TikTok fame, and what happens when we start being honest with ourselves at 70. "Ever think of writing a memoir?" he asked. "Only every third Sunday," I joked, "but I'd rather just live the story." The next Sunday, Kent showed up early. "Lila's taking a pottery class," he said, a little breathless from the walk. "She says it helps her work through tension." "Iris teaches pottery," I said thoughtfully, "in Portland." "Small world," he mused. Then he pulled something from his jacket pocket. A laminated photo of a younger me holding baby Kent, beaming with tired joy, standing outside the old house with peeling paint and a mailbox that never closed right. "I found this in one of Dad's old toolboxes," he said. "Thought you might like it." I stared at the image for a long time. "You were 26 in this," Kent added. "How did you do it all back then?" I smiled, still looking at the picture. "Back then, you didn't have a choice. You just did it." And then collapsed quietly after bedtime. Quirky fact of the day. The average toddler asks over 300 questions a day. No wonder moms learn how to function on autopilot. We both laughed. Kent glanced out at the garden. "Miles says you two are planting lavender next." "Lavender and honesty," I said with a smirk. He raised an eyebrow. "The flower or the trait?" "Both, if we're lucky." That night, I found myself in bed, staring up at the ceiling. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I finally could. I thought about how far we'd come in such a short time. Lila's polite texts, Kent's quiet reckonings, Iris's cat-shaped ceramics now lined my bookshelf. And Miles, my Miles, had started signing his school drawings with Nana plus me in the corner. Everything hadn't been fixed, not by a long shot, but it was growing. And that, more than money, more than revenge or even redemption, was what I had been aching for all along. To grow again. To matter again. To belong on purpose. Academically debatable phrase of the day. Forgiveness is a selfish act done for others. Some scholars say it's freedom. Others say it's fantasy. I say it's fertilizer. Messy, but essential for new roots. Tomorrow, Miles and I would plant lavender. Then, maybe write in our truth journals. Then, maybe burn the list I made 3 years ago, the one with every slight, every cold comment, every paper plate. I think I'm ready to stop keeping score. The final morning of our arrangement dawned with a crisp breeze and that early autumn hush, like the world itself was holding its breath. Miles was already up, curled on the couch with his favorite fleece blanket and one of my old cookbooks. He had bookmarked a page with a neon sticky note that read, "Nana, can we try this next weekend?" It was for homemade pumpkin scones. "You've got high hopes, kid," I said, ruffling his hair. He grinned. "I believe in us." Outside, the sun lit up the herb garden. The lavender we'd planted was still tiny, but showing the faintest promise of blooms. It was funny, really, how something as small as a sprout could hold so much meaning. Like a little flag saying, "We're still trying." Later, Kent arrived alone. I wasn't surprised. I'd come to understand Lila needed more time. Healing was a private sport for some. We sat on the back porch. He handed me a document, his signature scrawled at the bottom. It confirmed the new custody and visitation agreements for Miles' weekends, plus the reaffirmation of my trust's conditions. "I wanted to do it in person," he said. "No lawyers. Just us." I nodded, skimming the papers, even though I already knew what they said. Then he added, "I've been seeing a counselor. Family therapy, too. I want to do better." I looked up, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them sun wishes. "I know you do." He cleared his throat. "Lila, she's struggling. But she's trying. She told me last week that she's been watching old home videos of you and Dad. Said she was surprised how much laughter there was." I raised. He chuckled. "I guess somewhere along the way she built this idea that you were stern or hard to please. But those videos, she said they made her feel like maybe she missed something." I stared out at the lavender. "She missed a lot," I said softly. "But we all did, in one way or another." Old age inside of the day. Regret is heavier than anger, but it carries more seeds for change, if you're brave enough to plant them. Miles and I spent that afternoon baking pumpkin scones. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter and possibility. He made a mess of the flour, and I didn't care one bit. As the scones cooled, I pulled down a small wooden box from the top pantry shelf. It was Henry's once upon a time, but it had become my time capsule. Inside were photos, receipts from our first house, an old watch, and a yellowed list titled, "What Matters Most." Miles peeked over my shoulder. "What's that?" "A treasure map," I whispered, letting him hold it. He studied the list, mouthing each item as he read. Respect. Time. Laughter. Second chances. Pancakes. Knowing when to speak. Knowing when to listen. Love. "I like number 5, he declared. "Me too." He paused. "What about number 8? That's the treasure itself, I said, kissing his temple. Everything else just helps you find it. That evening, after Kent and Miles left, I stood alone in my living room. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was earned. I wandered out to the porch, wrapping myself in a soft shawl, and looked at the stars coming out one by one, each one a tiny promise in the dark. That's when I remembered the letter. Months ago, when I was still deep in the middle of my 3-year test, I'd written a letter to myself, sealing it with the vow not to open it until the day I felt truly, honestly at peace. Tonight was that day. I found it in the back of the old recipe book, the envelope yellowing, my handwriting a little shakier than I remembered. I opened it. Inside was a single line. When you stop proving who you are to people who never saw you, go sit in the sun. You've arrived. I folded it back slowly. Quirky fact of the day. Sunflowers turn to face the sun. Even on cloudy days. When there's no sun, they turn toward each other. Isn't that something? We're all just trying to find the light. And sometimes, we forget we can be the light for someone else. Even the ones who once made us feel small. Academically debatable phrase of the day. Family is who shows up when it's hard. Some argue blood is the only anchor. Others say loyalty makes kin. I say, family is the one who holds your truth and still reaches for your hand. I stayed on the porch until the stars had multiplied, and the night air smelled like pine and memory. I thought of Henry, of how proud he would be. I thought of Kent, still learning. Of Lila, still unlearning. And of Miles, carving his own truth in a little spiral notebook. I'd won back my place not with revenge, but with resolve. Not with shouting, but with silence broken at the right time. Not with cruelty, but with clarity. I was home. Really, truly home. If you're still here with me, thank you. I know this wasn't an easy story. It had sharp edges and quiet heartbreaks. But it was also about truth, the slow, aching kind that rises over years and demands to be seen. When I look back on everything that happened, the part that lingers most isn't the betrayal, or even the money. It's the moment my grandson said, "You're still the one who makes the best pancakes." Because that's what matters in the end. Not status, not wealth, but memory, love, presence. I spent years living like a ghost in my own family. And maybe that's why it took something dramatic to pull the curtains back. But I don't regret the silence. I don't regret the waiting. Sometimes, stillness is its own kind of storm. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you've felt that same weight. Like your value has been overlooked, dismissed, or measured against the wrong things. Please hear me when I say, your worth isn't up for negotiation. Not in your family, not in this world. You are more than what others see. You are your history, your strength, your tenderness. You are everything you didn't say and everything you still have time to do. So let go of proving. Choose peace. Choose truth. Choose you. And remember, if you ever need to start over, start with kindness, the quiet kind, the kind that says, I remember who I am. Now, turn down your screen brightness. Let your breathing slow. Let the silence settle. And if you can, let this story stay with you like a gentle echo. Because the truth always waits for the right moment. And tonight, it found us. Thank you for being here. Watch the next stories on your screen now. They're waiting, just like I was. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe
And feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.